You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. It is an annual rite of passage here as we are on the brink of the start of another college football season. Our friend Bud Elliott releases his blue chip ratio, and that happened over the weekend. If you're not familiar with the blue chip ratio, this is essentially the line of demarcation between the haves and the have-nots. This is not to say that if you meet this criteria, you are going to win the national championship. It is only to say that if you do not cross this threshold, you cannot win the national championship. So Bud Elliott went back and looked at every national champion all the way back to 2011, when you can go back as far as recruiting rankings go, in the current format anyway. And every single national champion, every one of them, has a blue chip ratio above 50%. If you're wondering what that means, it means over a 4-year period, have you recruited more 5 and 4 stars than 3 and 2 stars? Meaning the majority of your roster has to be 5 and 4 stars over a 4-year period of recruiting. And if not, you don't meet the blue chip ratio, you cannot win the national championship. For example, go back to 2011 Alabama, 71%. 2012 Alabama, 71%. Florida State in 2013 was at 53%. 2016 Clemson won it with the lowest total at 52%. Michigan a couple of years ago was at 54%. Last year, Ohio State was at 90%. 90% of their roster was 5 and 4 stars. So if you're wondering, by the way, 2019 LSU, 64%. So if you're wondering how it all shakes out, that's what we're all looking at with respect to the blue chip ratio. Is the majority of your roster over a 4-year period in recruiting made up of 5 and 4 stars. So I'll tell you how it shaked out this year, specifically what it means for LSU. But there's one gigantic thing that they have not figured out. You could probably guess what it is. And Bud disputes this, but I disagree with him. I'll explain why here in just a quick second. So at the top of the blue chip ratio this year is Alabama and Ohio State, each with 89% of their roster made up of 4 and 5 stars over the last 4 years in recruiting. Georgia, 84%, Texas A&M, 82%, Oregon, 78%, Texas, 78%, then there's LSU at 73%. Followed by Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Penn State, Miami, Florida, Auburn, Michigan, Southern Cal, Clemson, Tennessee, and Florida State. So those are your 18. It's not to say those are the teams that are going to win the championship. You're going to win the championship. Just say that the national champion this year is going to be one of the 18 teams that I just mentioned. Here's my problem. And by the way, I'm not disputing the validity of the blue chip ratio, because clearly it is a methodology that is proven over 2 decades now. And near a decade and a half. My issue are the transfers and how you account for that. Now, look, one thing's for certain. The SEC is still dominant. Of the 18 teams I just mentioned, 9 are from the SEC. By the way, not a single team from the Big 12, and none particularly close to being in the blue chip ratio as well. Maybe Texas Tech, if they keep spending the way they are over 3-4 years, can get into that mix. And with an expanded playoff, you're going to get non-blue chip ratio teams into the field. They're just not going to win the championship. I mentioned TCU. Well, look at Boise a year ago, or SMU, or Arizona State. None of those are blue chip ratio teams, but they got in an expanded playoff. It's just to say they're not going to win the championship. The transfers are my issues, because you're looking at having more 4 and 5 star signees over the last 4 recruiting cycles. And there's 2 problems with this. One is it's not accounting for the transfers you bring in. And number 2, guys don't stay. Let me give you an example. If you're looking at the last 4 classes It's the class of 2025, the current freshmen, 24, 23, and 22. So go from 2022 through the current class that just signed. In 2022, Quincy Wiggins, Walker Howard, LaTerrence Welch, DeMario Tolan were all blue chip ratio guys that transferred. Will Campbell is a blue chip ratio guy. He's in the NFL. He ain't even on the roster anymore. That's 5 from that class. The 2023 class, there are 11 4- and 5-star players that signed with LSU in the class of 2023 that are no longer on the roster. Lance Hurd, Deshaun Womack, Jaylen Brown, Kamorian Pimpton, Jackson Howard, Shelton Sampson, Ricky Collins, Ryan Yates, Christian Braithwaite, Kai Preon, Mac Markway. All of the 11 guys I just mentioned, they all count for LSU on the blue chip ratio, although none of them play for LSU anymore. That's 16 players over a 2-year period that, and by the way, LSU had lost none from the 24 class, which is great. All the 4- and 5-stars that were freshmen a year ago are still on the roster. But look outside of LSU. Caleb Downs is a great example. I just mentioned Alabama, which is still benefiting off of the historical success that Nick Saban and his staffs had, because you're talking about a 4-year cycle, which still accounts for a lot of Nick Saban. Well, Caleb Downs still counts for Alabama because he was recruited in a cycle 3 years ago, or two years ago, to Alabama. Well, he went to Alabama as a freshman, left, he's about to begin his second season at Ohio State. But he counts towards Alabama's blue chip ratio. That doesn't make a lick of sense. Flip it the other way. When I talk about incoming transfers, a guy that I've mentioned that I think is a case in point of this is A.J. Halsey. A.J. Halsey, when he was coming out of high school, was a 3-star recruit. He was the number 1,900 player nationally, 1,900 overall out of any position. He goes to Houston, becomes a first-team All-Big 12 safety. It leads their conference in interceptions. Now he plays for LSU. Is LSU better at safety because they have A.J. Halsey? I think so. But if Sage Ryan were still on the team as a 5-star, he helps you toward the blue chip ratio while Halsey doesn't. Who would you rather have if I gave you the option? So even still, I think the blue chip ratio holds. It holds up because I think it's what it illustrates is that over the last 15 years, yes, the 4-year recruiting cycle was relevant. And it identified the teams that invested the most money in their coaching staff, their facilities, their support staff, their recruiting budget, all the things that allowed you to recruit the best players. Those programs are still doing that. They've just moved the target from investing so heavily and solely into high school recruiting into now investing into NIL and into your collective and now revenue share. And all of those resources are still being used to build the best rosters. So whether you look at it as a 4-year rolling average or you work in the transfer portal or however it may be, it's still telling us the same thing. This is the very small, relatively small group of teams that are investing the resources into being at a different level of great in college football, which makes you capable of winning a national championship. But the good news for LSU is they're on the list, and they will always be on the list because LSU will always invest whatever they need to invest to make sure they are capable of competing for and winning national championships. And this year is certainly evidence of that. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.